Hi, it's Marisol, your rebel guide to living a life of freedom abroad, bringing you an episode of Roaming the Now, where entrepreneurs, coaches, and mentors come together to give you a behind the scenes look at the real and raw experience of setting out to a new country and building a life and business abroad. Make sure to like and subscribe to Roaming the Now. Enjoy! Hello, welcome to another episode of Roaming the Now. This is your host, Marisol, and today I have Grecia Corbala joining us from Australia, who is actually originally from Mexico. And I'm really excited about our conversation today. We're going to be diving into how do you deal with homesickness while living abroad? But before we get into this really interesting subject, I would love for you, Grecia, to tell us a little bit more about you, being from Mexico, what took you to Australia, and a little bit about your journey.
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Marisol. I'm so excited to be here and I'm so excited to be sharing with your audience. I think this has been a really good connection, Mexico kind of united us somehow. But yeah, so my name is Grecia. I am a mindfulness and empowerment coach. Recently, just switched to help people living abroad. I've been in Australia for 5 years. I think a bit over 5 years, but I'm really not counting the months to be honest. Um, yeah, so when I was in Mexico, I was always wanting to live abroad and explore and travel, and that was a long life dream. So when the opportunity came to study either in Canada or Australia, and then I don't know, the universe just aligned for me to just go straight to Australia. So that was the option, and I was really so happy to do that move. But of course, as you know, moving to another country always brings a lot of things inside you, a lot of things that you haven't worked or maybe that you haven't even noticed, or maybe just to look inside and appreciate more who you are, where you come from, and who you want to be. So that's a little bit about my journey. I also have a podcast, Three Seats, where I share my experiences and experiences of others around moving abroad, but also like personal development and mental health and emotional health, which is what I'm passionate about. And that's why this topic today excites me so much.
Yes. So, right before we started recording, you were sharing how one of the toughest things about being abroad for you is the time of your birthday. So, why don't we just start there and kind of just elaborate on that?
Yes. So, of course, as we were saying before recording, all the celebrations that we have in Mexico, our traditions, they hit very hard, of course. But I think my birthday is the one that's the hardest for me. It's the most difficult time of the year, the most nostalgic one, just because, being from Mexico, I have a very big family there. I had my friends that I grew up with, of course. And then we have this thing in Mexico where you celebrate with your family, your friends, your colleagues, but for entire like 2 weeks, probably. Even after your birthday, you keep celebrating and stuff like that. So it was always like a massive thing. And being my parents' first child, they used to celebrate all my birthdays, since I was a kid. So it was always like this big moment for me to enjoy it with people that I loved. And also, my family would call me, all of them, the 20, 30 people that I have in my family, they would call me, each one of them, to say, hey, hello, happy birthday, And as soon as I moved abroad, the time difference and everything came into play. That was the loneliest birthday ever because no one remembered the time difference. So I didn't receive any messages of happy birthday. Just, of course, my mom and my dad were like keeping up with the time. But otherwise, yeah, that's when I first realized, like, wow, yeah, this is gonna be hard. This is gonna be definitely hard. It's a very nostalgic time, and it's really, I've learned to, I mean, I've been here for 5 years. I've been in Australia for six of those birthdays, and I can tell you that it doesn't get easier, but you just learn to cope with it in a different way, and you just learn to handle it in a different way.
Yeah. So, what are some of the ways that, throughout the years, you've learned to cope with it and deal with it? I mean, probably compared to the first one, right? Let's think about the first three birthdays compared to the past three birthdays. How has what tools have you tapped into? Like, what has been helping you now deal with the homesickness that you experience?
Well, it's definitely been a journey. A journey, as I said, of discovering what works for me, what doesn't work for me, which is one of the most important things that I would like your audience to know, that we are all different. And maybe what people would share or what people would think about their own journey abroad, it's going to look very different according to who you are, where you come from, your countries, and yeah, just your values and what you're more inclined to. So, the most important thing that I've learned, it's to actually allow and normalize the emotions that come with the homesickness. Because really, homesickness is this distress, this emotional distress from this sensation of loss. And, it's kind of a threat to our safety and our identity. And we're missing that comfort and that familiarity. So I think the most important thing is just to normalize how you're feeling and that it's normal. Like it's really valid and it's normal for you to be in that position. You've just left your entire life, right? You've left not just your comfort zone, but you've left everything, even yourself. Like that part of yourself is there, that version of yourself. And it's normal for you to have these feelings of loneliness and just craving that safety and familiarity. And the most important thing that comes with this is to stop feeling guilty about feeling homesick. That's probably one of the biggest difference that I've noticed with these birthdays. At the beginning, I was so concerned and I was kind of like hiding my emotions just because I thought I'm in the other side of the world. I chose this. This was my lifelong dream. So I am not allowed to feel homesick. I am not allowed to look back, because I chose this and I should be happy and my life should be this outburst of happiness all the time. And it's not true. We are human, and part of the human experience is all of the emotions. So just trying to be very gentle with myself and process those emotions. As I said, just learning how to process emotions in a way that works. For me, it helps to write, to dance, to try to process them, understand what's happening, because at the end of the day, we have to understand that emotions are the way we interact with the world. They are feedback, they are the way we are prompted to do things, right? Like if we see the movie Inside Out, for example, you see that when there's loneliness, anger, disgust, or something like that, or sadness, you're prompted to do something. That emotion is showing you something, and it's kind of like guiding you to somewhere that aligns to you. So, for instance, maybe I wouldn't be calling my family if I didn't feel homesick, right? Or maybe I wouldn't be prompted to form new connections in a new country if I didn't feel lonely. I wouldn't be exploring what's around me if I didn't feel like I want this to feel familiar in this environment. So it's just emotions are not a bad thing. We just need to learn how to process them and to let them guide us.
Yes. I was just saying, guide them. I mean, we can, like, in some ways, I guess, like through, well, not really, because through self regulation, we're able to we're able to guide where we're going next. But I mean, the emotions that we're feeling, I think of them the same way. Like I think of emotions as energy, and energy is how we interact and how we communicate with the world, right? And there's not really such thing as a bad emotion. I really understand what you're saying in terms of like we don't guide emotions, right? Emotions guide us. I mean, we do have the opportunity to decide where we go like moving forward by using like techniques for self-regulation and like our nervous system. But I feel like these days, especially like on social media, feeling bad emotions is like it's like looked down upon or like frowned upon. Like everyone's always just like change your mindset or like be in this like high vibe. And I'm like, but like let's pause here. Like all of these emotions serve a purpose, right? And I was and as I was listening to you talk specifically around, when you moved and this was your lifelong dream and like you were here, made me think about something that I've been sitting with a lot this week around how like the two emotions can coexist of having the gratitude of living the life we've always dreamed of, but also the grief of letting go the life that was familiar and that we knew. And I experienced that actually a lot when I moved to Malinalco, like to live in a pueblo mágico, to live it like, in such a healing, beautiful place had always been something that I thought was going to take such a long time. And then it was here and it was like, I was so grateful, but then at the same time, I was feeling so much grief. And even just with things that have been happening in my life and how I've been like growing and changing, I feel so grateful. And at the same time, I do still feel that grief of like, oh, wow, like it is time to say goodbye to certain parts of me, goodbye to certain ways of being. Um, and I think that, that's kind of like, I guess, homesickness in some ways, right? It's like the grief and the gratitude. I'd love to get your insights.
Yes, definitely. Look, I think that people think that emotions are just like I get what you're saying because I have this feeling that people think that once you work on sadness or once you understand your anger, that means that you are never gonna feel it again. That means that you have processed it, you're done with, you're healed from anger, which is kind of like a bit ridiculous to think of when you think that really emotions are our feedback to the world, right? So if I'm healed, just to say so, quote unquote, from anger, um, then how am I gonna know when someone breaches my boundaries? How am I gonna know when I'm not okay with something? How am I gonna defend myself from something that's not fair for me, right? So each emotion, even if it sounds like um how do you say this? Like not in line with what everyone's saying. Each emotion really helps you a lot to find more about yourself. And this part that you're talking about, it's very important because when you're living abroad, people think if I get through the homesickness the first month, the first year, then I'm done forever, right? It's not true. It just keeps coming and going as it goes, and it's completely normal. You're longing of a life that you've lived, you know what you've gone through. So it doesn't matter how much you process and how much you heal from that past, even when you're not attached to those specific situations anymore in a harmful way, you still have this part of homesickness, of seeking that familiarity and that safety. And just even sometimes it's not about the other people, but it's about who you were back then, right? It's about I'm missing that person that I was that used to do these things and that used to feel this way. So I think that's when it comes a very important part that I was thinking about while you were talking. And this is something that Don Miguel Ruiz says, the author of The Four Agreements. He says something very beautiful about emotions, and that's that there are no negative emotions and there are not bad emotions. What is negative is when someone doesn't learn how to process their emotions properly, and then because they are all bottled up inside that person, then there's an outburst of anger and an outburst of sadness. That's what causes harm to you and to other people, but it's not the emotion, it's the fact that you didn't learn how to process it in a healthy way, right? So, as you were saying about this of the duel and everything, I'm just thinking how important it is to really allow yourself to get into those emotions and just grieve. Like, it's okay to grieve it, it's okay to grieve that part, right?
Yeah, 100%. I really agree with you. I mean, I've noticed, especially like this time of life, I don't know what's happening, but like, I don't know, something happens and then I'm emotional and I'm like crying and it's like happy tears. And then something happens and then I'm emotional and it's more like sad tears. And then, like, for example, 2 weeks ago, I was in a temazcal, and the way that this guide she led us, like the second puerta, was like all about emotional release. And the way I expressed like my emotional release was like anger. It was like screaming. It was like rage. And I had the space to do that, right? And to to do that in an environment that like that was what we were meant to be doing. I had the tools to bring myself out of it in terms of like, okay, wow, I'm like my nervous system and me are like, whoa, what's going on here? But I had the tools to, calm myself down because of the work that I do, calm myself down, be able to stay for like the next couple of puertas, and I think really like surrender. But it is like, I could have judged myself in the Temazcal for feeling like, oh, I'm gonna scream and rage with anger because that's actually what's happening, like inside, like that's really what I'm feeling. But instead, I was just like, this is a place and this is the time, and I'm not gonna judge myself. And I think that that's where a lot of individuals really get hung up, and especially around homesickness, like judging yourself for missing home. Like it's very, very normal, right? You spent a very good portion of your life there. It's normal for you to miss home. Even I miss home sometimes, specifically more around like systems, systems and organization. 'Cause-
Yeah.
yeah.
That's something I don't miss from Mexico, definitely. Nothing to do with admin or processes or paperwork.
That's, like, probably the only thing I miss about the US is just, like, admins and systems and paperwork because it's a lot more organized, and here it's really like, "Ay, ay, ay, okay, confianza. This is the way it's done? Really? Okay."
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
So what have you found, like, now that you're more along in the journey, right? Like, you're going on 5, 6 years living abroad, living in Australia. Like, what have you found to be the most powerful tool to handle your emotions, especially in those moments when you're like, "I really miss my family?"
Well, I think with homesickness is really challenging to just find one single tool because as you were saying, it comes like in different stages of your life and sometimes it comes in the form of what you said, anger, sometimes it's sadness. But thinking about what you were saying about this duality when you are feeling gratitude at the same time as feeling grief, one of the most important thing is to focus on those things. I try to do both kind of like worlds at the same time. So for the part that I left behind, I try to nourish those connections that I have abroad. So try to call my family, my sister, she's my best friend. So I would just call her and be like, "Hey, I'm homesick. I miss you," Um, so it's just kind of like trying to go back and nourish that part that I have there. Maybe even cooking a meal that's a Mexican version with the things that I can find here, and or go to a Mexican restaurant. Try to be how do you say this, like connected to that version of myself that I left. That's something that I try to do a lot because it nourishes this part of where I come from and who I am, not in an attachment way, but more in a part where I can grow from that and I can learn how to coexist with that grieving part and not lose myself in the process, right? And the second part would be the gratitude part, right? So you're in a new environment and homesickness comes from really being nostalgic about that safety and familiarity. So what you would have to do in a new country and something that I've been doing is trying to create that safety and familiarity in this new country. So trying to find new connections in here, trying to learn more about the culture just to feel more part of this community, which can be a bit challenging when you're from abroad. Going to community events and just like trying to make friends in here. I follow a neuroscientist who's Andrew Huberman. He has like many episodes. He has a podcast, and he talks about how social bonding actually is very, very important for humans at a biochemistry level, right? So I don't remember exactly what's that you release. I don't remember if it's dopamine or serotonin when you're with friends, but that definitely is something that helps improve your mood. So definitely if you're feeling homesick, I always try to, once I'm calm and once I'm like in a place where I'm like, okay, I can interact with people, I do try to kind of like push myself to, okay, I need the interaction, the social interaction. I need to feel safe in this new environment. And the most important thing as well is, well, talking about this biochemistry part as well, maybe just trying to do things that would release some endorphins, Like I always say, work with your body, not against it. So if you feel like there's something that you can do to feel better, release some endorphins, just go ahead and do it. Just like physical activity, or doing something that you like, something that might help your body out of that state, because we are body, mind, and soul at all times. So sometimes I feel like when homesickness comes in, we try to find a lot of tools that are very catered to the emotional part or the mindset part, but our body it's also suffering all of these things that we're going through. So it's very important to look at our bodies and how can we support our body through this grieving moment. And of course, the most important thing, seek support. That's something that has helped me a lot. Work with coaches, working with therapists. I work with shamans, with occupational therapists. Really just go out and seek support, not just from your inner circle, but if you consider that it would be good. And that's something that has helped me a lot in these um, latest years. It's just really working with someone who knows how to guide you into what you're going through.
Yeah, I actually like agree with you 100% on seeking support. So for the past 6 months, I've been working with like my mentor who has been supporting me through my like gene keys journey and like really unraveling my shadows. And like, to be quite frank, like the summer sucked. Like the summer for me is always a time where I get to do my deepest work ever. And then fall comes and I'm just like, finally, like, I guess the way I could describe it is like during the summer is when I feel the heat. And like the heat is like that inner alchemy, like all the things that need to be burned away. So that when fall comes, like it's a new season and it's new leaves, it's new growth, it's like ready. But yeah, during this entire journey, I've had support, and I think that that's something that I probably don't talk about enough, like I've had support from mentors, I've had support from therapists. The coaches that I have worked with when it comes to more of these sensitive issues are definitely like trauma informed practitioners. Like they really know like the emotional body and how important it is to connect with it. And yeah, I think support is really important on like that professional level as well as just in your local community. Like I have been able to establish relationships like when you're having a hard time or a rough time, being like, hey, can I have like some time to talk? Like, are you available to talk? Because I remember I'm blanking on the name, but there was this documentary. I feel like I've cited this before in an episode. There was this documentary on like how to live to 100 years. And the like one of the common factors, no matter where they were in the world in the blue zones with the centenarians, was community. And I think that that's really important because we live in like a world right now where I feel like it kind of glamorizes being by yourself, right? Like individualization, but actually like we need to be in community. And so homesickness is really normal while you're living abroad because you left your community and you're still in the process of potentially building that new community or feeling that sense of safety within your community.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, and that's something that's very true, and that I feel like I didn't value it because, as you said, maybe in this world nowadays it's very valued that you do things yourself on your own, and you gotta do your inner work and your everything. So it's always you, right? You against the world and everything. And I really didn't think that it was that important until I listened to this podcast of this neuroscience person, and he was really talking about, like, it's massive. We are social beings. It really affects us in every level, the community and the social interaction. So it's really, really important to nourish that part. And as you said, like, I understand that when you move abroad, because I've been there, it's hard to make those connections. And while you're making them, you can feel very, very lonely. but being an introvert myself, I do have to say that you just have to push yourself. You have to push yourself to try to find that kind of like circle, like new inner circle, but now in your new country, so that you feel supported and that you have these kind of connections abroad, because it's already very hard to be living abroad. And if you are lonely the entire time, it's even harder. So I would say that, yeah, social interactions and community and building that new safety, familiar, like safe, familiar environment abroad, it's one of the most important things you can do for homesickness, especially.
Yeah, I would agree. As someone who I come across as an extrovert, I'm just going to be really like honest with everyone listening. I come across as an extrovert, but to be really honest, I am an introvert at heart. Like, I'm still actually finding the balance between my time being spent with community with other people and like alone, because I really, really value my alone time. So, that was really interesting my first year living here in Mexico, because I knew that I wasn't like necessarily going to stay in those places forever, you know? So I didn't really put that much emphasis on finding community. But now, like where I am, since I've been here for almost a year next month, like I would say the past 6 months, I've really like grounded and rooted in finding community and been like, oh, wow, like this is fun. This is cool. I like this.
Yeah, it really changes. That's something that I told a friend. I just met a friend that she came to Australia probably some months ago. And the first thing that I told her is, you have to start making community here. Because I don't know, you will tell me about this, but your experience abroad really changes when you start creating these strong bonds with people. The first year for me was awful here in Australia because I had no one and I was very lonely, homesick all the time, depressed, anxious, stressed. I was in a very, very bad place and I wanted to go back home and I was ready to go back home. And then I started making friends and really nourishing these new connections and having best friends and learning about their culture. And I don't know, it was just my experience changed from that moment because I started feeling like, oh, you know what, I can do this. Like, I can stay here a bit longer, and it's because you start feeling safe in this new environment that you're creating. So it's really, really important to prioritize, to try to connect and just build a community abroad.
Yeah, community is really important no matter where you are, no matter if you're living abroad or no matter if
Yeah.
you're living in your hometown. I just like really want to emphasize like you need to have a community because of the neuroscience, because of the studies. I highly encourage you, if you're like doubtful about it, like in person human interaction is so valuable. And I feel like because of the digital age that we're living in, it kind of gets lost. So, with that, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and just like how do you deal with homesickness while living abroad, as well as us really kind of just venturing into how important it is to have community, you know? So, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, get in contact with you, what is the best way?
So right now I have my social media, which is at Grecia Corbala. I'm like that in every social platform, TikTok, Instagram. I would suggest maybe just Instagram is better just because you get a bit more content. And if I have anything coming up, I will announce it there anyway. And of course, listen to my podcast. Three Seats comes every week with a new episode. And yeah, just thank you so much for having me. This was a very nice conversation. I love talking about emotions, so I could be here all day. But thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thanks to your audience for making it this far.
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad to have you here. And yes, this season really is focused on like emotions and like psychological things. So I'm really happy that you came here with an open heart, like really open to share your experience. Um, we need to talk about emotions more. That's definitely something that is like the billboard of life right now. Talk about your emotions more. Be more open about it. They're not bad. We don't need to label them. And I'll make sure to put the way to contact you in the show notes. So until next time, this is your host, Marisol, signing off of another episode of Roaming Now. I hope that you are enjoying wherever you are in the world. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for catching this episode of Roaming the Now. If you have not already, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, wherever you are in the world, I hope you are enjoying Roaming the Now.